Hi, and welcome to Are You Done Yet? The podcast from Innovative E about your work and project management challenges. Today, I have with me, as usual, Brian Quick.
Hey, everybody.
And special guest today, Carmen DeArdo from Tasktop.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Brian, you want to kick us off?
Thanks for coming, Carmen. We're really happy to have you today on Are You Done Yet? The podcast to solve your work and project management challenges. Episode 7. As you know, folks, we always have great guests on our podcast. Mike and I are partnered with a great company called Tasktop. And the way that we came across Tasktop is some of you out there are looking to integrate Project Online with another line of business system like Azure DevOps or ServiceNow. And instead of building something ourselves, we went out in the market and we thought we would take a look at what the best integration partners are out there with the best software. And we came across Tasktop, started a relationship. We're currently talking to a bunch of different customers right now about implementing Tasktop as part of our overall solution. And it's going really well. Welcome, Carmen.
Great to be here, and I'm excited about the relationship and to talk today on the podcast.
Great. So, Carmen, the way we came into this, as I kind of explained briefly, is, people have different methodologies that they're trying to use on their project management systems. And they have, your traditional waterfall methodology for projects and project management. They also have agile methodologies that they're employing in IT mainly, but in other areas as well, we're seeing. And they want to get an all-up picture of what's going on across those different kinds of projects. And so there are folks working in Azure DevOps or in another tool. They're doing, your epics, your user stories. They're breaking things down, and they're doing the agile project management that way. But they still want that to roll up to an overall portfolio. Maybe they have some compliance things that they need to account for. They also want to be able to fund things from a top down and do it on an annual basis. And so that's where Project Online comes into play. So let's talk about that a little bit and how you see Tasktop helping with that kind of scenario.
Sure. So, I started my career in telecommunications at Bell Labs, and while we didn't talk about it this way, we kind of had this product or value stream way of looking at things. Walter Schuhart, who worked with Deming on the Statistical Control and Plan Do Check Act, started at Bell Labs actually, almost 100 years ago. And so some of these concepts right around value streams, are not new, but I think what new is how we apply them in the digital age. I mean, that's probably an overused term, but we now, we have artifacts and tools that represent how we work.
Right.
And companies have different tools, and we view, there's a value stream, and however you describe it, right? Ideate, create, release, operate, and you use different tools. So you may have a portfolio tool and an agile management tool, a project management tool, quality management. I call it STAR management, right? Release management, service management, right? So they give you different perspectives, but really there's kind of one source of the truth. There's one aspect of flow. And whether people recognize it or not, there's a value stream associated with the set of activities that they're doing to deliver value.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
And value streams start and end with a customer, right? So do people really understand who is that customer? What value is that customer expecting? And, where is the value flowing and how can you represent that? And then I think the second thing that's important, and you kind of touched on it, is there's different types of work.
Right.
So, Mick Kirsten in the Flow framework, he wrote the book Project to Product, who's our CEO, talks about 4 different types of work, and they're features, risks, debt, and defects. And so a lot of times people think about features, right? They're the goodies that the customer's going to get.
Right.
Absolutely.
Great. And that's why everybody's in business, is to provide those goodies. But you have to keep your products, your systems healthy, and to keep them healthy, it's like kind of like a balanced diet.
Right.
Right? You have to consider well, defects are just, you want to minimize defects and rework, obviously, but they're visible and you have to see them and you have to manage them and prioritize them. But then the two things that get neglected a lot are risks, which are really like the compliance issues, the security issues. I have my struts library, right, needs upgraded. I'm using open source. I'm running security scans, and they're finding possible vulnerabilities. Am I dealing with those? Am I making those visible? Am I addressing those? Because we know that if we deliver value, but you don't protect it, you're not going to be successful very long. We've all gotten those letters in the mail. Oh, yes, your data's been
breached.
Etc. Right, and then there's debt, which is really a way of improving things. It's an investment in improving. So we think about technical debt, but it's really people, process, or technology. Right, DevOps obviously is a big deal right now. I helped lead DevOps initiative when I was a customer at Tasktop and Nationwide, and so you have to. There's a lot of DevOps practices, right? The Gene Kim, the DevOps handbook. You have to know when to play those practices, and the way that comes about is understanding flow and where things are flowing, or more importantly, where they're not, because you don't want to play a practice if it's not really going to help the problem at hand. So debt's important. You need to invest in debt. You need to invest in improvements, and then you need to be able to say, if I do this, did it actually improve? Did it move the needle? So you need data around that, and a lot of what we do with the customer is to help them manage, stay on top of their initiatives, no matter what their methodology, no matter what their tools, stay on top of those things to be able to, in the end, deliver value for the business. Because otherwise, why, what are we doing this for, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the risk factor to that. And there's things that I have to do to keep my systems compliant, to keep them up to date. And they're not always the sexiest, fanciest things to the users and to the business, right?
Right.
And in the past, I've been in IT departments where we've sort of struggled with that prioritization. Like, we have to do all these things. And some of it has to do with technical debt that we built up over time, or things that we need to do to keep the systems running, upgraded, and compliant. And the customer doesn't want to hear about that kind of stuff. They just wants to get their new features.
Right.
So how are we balancing that? And what's the best way to balance that as an IT department and say, look, customer, I need to do these things over here, and you only have this much room, you only have this much bandwidth for the rest of it?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And that's one that we deal with a lot, because when we typically engage with a customer and we start talking about the 4 types of work, and we start to identify that, right? So what artifacts are carrying these business values, right? The epics, the features, the stories, right? Or even the bugs for defects. We get the features and defects you work through pretty quickly, but then you talk about risk and debt, and it's much harder. And I think, it gets back to this view of making it visible, right? It's very hard to, in life in general, right? I mean, I might, the worst health issue to have is the one you're not aware of, right?
Right.
You're not treating it. So the same thing with our products or our projects, right? The worst issue is the ones that aren't even visible. So the first thing is we'll make it visible. And so, one of the flow metrics that we have on our dashboard is flow distribution, and it shows you the percent of work, that you're in it within a given time frame that you've completed. That's in these 4 categories, and it's color coded, right? So features are green, defects are red, risk is yellow, and debt is purple. When we first show those, so it's very visual. It looks more like a Christmas tree or a stoplight, right? It's red and green. And it's like, where's the yellow and where's the purple? It's not there. So the first thing it demonstrates visibly is there's very little investment here in debt. And really, the metrics and anything that you do, in this sense, is to drive the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations are where the value's going to happen, right? It goes back to like the Deming quality circles. The people closest to the work best understand what's going on. You want to drive the conversations with retros and with the product managers, the business, to get the point that you just made, which is we aren't going to stay healthy if it's just a steady diet of red and green, right? That's like we're missing our vegetables and fruits, or right? And so when you have the conversation, you go, well, tell me about that. Do you do security scans? Are you using open source libraries? Do you have, hardware, depending if they're in the cloud, they have on-premise. Do you have hardware things that, hardware systems that need upgraded, operating system upgrades? I mean, invariably, they're going to say yes. And you say, well, how do you manage that? And sometimes, I think, as you indicate, it's like, well, we have a security manager. They run a tool. They run a report.
Mm-hmm.
They have this report in front of them. It gets in an ops review. We have meetings. We try, it's a battle to get it prioritized, right? And so thinking about it more in terms of the value stream and the fact that it's not just accelerating the delivery of value, it's also the protection of value. And if you don't do that, you're eventually going to pay the price, right? Both with debt and risk. And so the first step is make it visible, drive the conversation to get an appreciation of the fact you need some investment here, and kind of train people visibly to say, if I'm not seeing yellow and purple, at least I'm as a leader, as an executive, as a business leader, I'm going to ask the question, where's the fruits and vegetables, right? Are we staying healthy, right? Because, we have to do it. It's just part of making sure that you can be successful long term, which is really what's important, right? We don't want just short term wins. We need long term success.
Right. Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's really interesting you talk about the visibility, and in our kind of view of the world in the work and project management space. That's always the first thing that we want to go after is being able to surface the information for better decision making. So in the project space, for instance, just without even talking about integrations or anything, just the ability to surface where things are. And that's when you start to talk about integration, pulling in other data from other sources and being able to say, all right, now we can put these things together and say, yeah, we're as far along here, but we're behind on this particular component, maybe it's a financial component or something else. And being able to get that visibility, and like you said, it really helps drive the decision making. It drives the conversations. We've said several times to our customers, that's what you want to get to. It's not about, project managers in particular spend a lot of their time chasing data and trying to get and make it into meaningful information. And the faster you can do that, the faster you get to the conversation about what do we do about it? Not where are we, but what do we do about it? And that's a big part of what we're really going after with the Tasktop partnership as well, is being able to pull those different disparate information together or data together into information that gives our customers that level of visibility. In fact, we really go after kind of our mission statement is really about providing work management freedom while also providing visibility, agility, and control. And so,
right.
Being able to pull these things together starts to really move people in that direction.
And I think what you're getting at is the cultural aspect of doing the management work, right? Is that,
absolutely.
Sometimes the reward system, the OKRs, don't include, they may be so scope focused that they don't include these components of risk and debt. And sometimes I use an analogy of, if I had a job to deliver something cross country with a fleet of trucks, and all I cared about was getting my delivery, from Ohio to California, if I don't do any maintenance, if I don't pay any attention to the trucks, I may get there, but the next person who has to use those trucks, and the trucks are kind of like our systems or applications, right? The permanent vehicles that we use to deliver these initiatives, I mean, they're going to have a mess on their hands, right? Now I got a bunch of broken down trucks, worn out truck drivers, and you're telling me I got to go back to New Jersey? And so the cultural aspect, I think, of this is very important. As a project manager, as a manager of an initiative, as a product manager, I need to not only be successful in my short-term objective, but I need to think about the total cost of ownership, the total health of my portfolio of these systems that are my true vehicles for delivering this. And then I have due diligence in making sure that, whether it's me or someone else who's driving these trucks, next, they're going to be successful too. And so the culture has to support that kind of mechanism, not to drive just short-term success.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk about the culture driving that success and being aware and, having some transparency about the risk and the debt that's involved in keeping the trucks running.
Right.
What about shadow IT in that conversation? You have situations in some companies where you don't have that kind of teamwork going on. So you have, say a marketing department or other department that's saying, IT is telling me they have to do all this stuff to keep this stuff running. I just want to get my job done. So I'm going to go buy something. I'm going to swipe a credit card. I'm going to get this done. And it's just adding another tool to the mix. Obviously, Tasktop can help with that a little bit by pulling some things back together. But if you see that, is that a phenomenon that's kind of still going on in today's IT world?
That's a great point. And just by its term shadow, so again, going to kind of the topic of visibility, right? Things that are in the shadows are not visible, right?
Right.
That aren't visible can't be managed. And if you can't manage it, you can't improve it and you can't sustain it. So we know this is an anti-pattern to success.
Mm-hmm.
I do think a couple things, right? Obviously moving to the cloud and some of those instances have gotten away from some of the servers under people's desks that
right. Oh yeah.
Right.
We've seen those
the good old days.
Even recently, there's a blinking light under somebody's desk. We don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is, but
yeah.
Don't turn it off.
It's an IP address and it goes up here and we've discovered it and what's going on there. And then I just think the last few years and all the focus, right, with all the breaches and things have, kind of the right kind of fear. I mean, I'm not a person who believes in fear and fear mongering and motivating people by fear, but sometimes having a healthy respect for what can go wrong can help drive the right behaviors, right? So I do think that's help, but I really think the key there is really this gap, and Mick writes about this also, about business and IT, and we don't speak the same language and business results, and do we really have activity-based metrics? And so your point, when they say, well, IT's not doing what I need, sometimes IT's saying, well, what do you mean? I'm doing this great stuff. We've implemented that. We got Docker, we got Kubernetes. What do you mean?
Yeah, right.
The business says, so what? Does this help? What's it done for my results, right? So at the top of the flow framework, we talk about business results, value, cost, quality, and then happiness. And it's not just happiness to the customer, it's happiness to the team. We know that happy teams are productive and productive teams are happy. And even though a lot of times organizations manage engagement, they don't do it across a value stream or a product or an initiative, right? They may do it organizationally. Well, okay, so my architects are happy, my testers aren't, or what is this telling me? What's actionable about that, right? If something's going south with a team, if they're not paying attention to that, if they're not paying attention to risk, if they're working with fragile code, like, well, don't touch that module because nobody knows how it works, and let's just design around it, right? Do everything we can to design around it. That's no fun, and that shows up. And so you have to be able to start to talk that same language, and it has to be based on outcomes. The business doesn't care if you have your Scrum certified, or the business cares, is my value, have you increased my value? Are my costs manageable? Is my quality better? which sometimes means I'm investing less in the rework, right? Somebody asked, what's the best quality metric? And I said, well, to me, it's that red part of that graph, right? Is it, if I'm spending 20%, 30% of my dollars in rework, that's telling me that's the best metric around quality, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I want that to be minimalized. Again, minimized in a healthy way. So we have to move from activity-based metrics to outcome-based metrics. And that gets back to, again, where is the real truth of how things are working? Well, a lot of the truths are in the artifacts, right, themselves. They tell us the truth. I mean, you can do value stream mapping, and sometimes I say it's kind of a wishes and ifs and buts and wishes game, right? We wished it worked this way. We hope it works this way. Well, the artifacts tell you how things are actually working. And you have to start to have metrics associated with the flow of business value and business results. And I think then, so if we're saying we're showing you things, we're making them visible, we're showing you that you've improved, your flow, your velocity, your flow time is less. Then that starts to correlate with business results.
Absolutely.
Now the business, all of a sudden, you're talking the same language. That's going to reduce the need, I think, for them to say, okay, the IT doesn't get it. I need to do my own thing, right? If you can start, to have that kind of healthy view of the world and a shared collaborative view, that goes a long way to addressing some of the culture around that.
Wow, that's really interesting. We talk to a lot of customers, and they all have different scenarios but they're all thinking about this type of thing. They're just not sure how to get started yet sometimes. When you look at a situation that we're having right now, we're dealing with more of a tactical issue. It's, I've got things in my service management system. I've got tickets. You talk about defects. And I want to make sure that if I'm working on those things and they're associated with the project that's going on, I'm capturing my time in one place and not in two places. The project management system's over here, the service management system's over there. So Tasktop is bridging that gap and making that translation. But I feel like at that customer, we're not really getting to the core of the problem. So what are kind of some questions you think would be good to ask about when you go into a customer and you see sort of the symptoms of this, but you're not sure if you're getting to the core of what's going on?
Yeah. So one of the things we do initially when we talk to a customer is we'll talk about, tell us the journey of these 4 types of flow items, right? So where does a feature start, right?
Okay.
Explain a little bit to me. And we try to get them to talk about the tools if they can, right? Because sometimes there aren't, especially what I call the left-hand side of the value stream, the work intake, it may still be in this Microsoft world of spreadsheets and Power
list, right? It's an
Excel, right?
Or a SharePoint list or wherever, God knows where. Right?
And they have their, they have tremendous value and they have their place. But if you don't put it in actual tool in your pipeline, right, that's traceable and that you can display and show all this information, again, make it visible. It's hard to have that one source of the truth, right? So we talk through, well, tell me the journey of a feature. Well, somebody has an idea, it goes here, goes in this system.
Talk about it.
Then what happens? We have meetings, then someone may duplicate enter something in another system, right? And sometimes it's the agile management system at that point, or project, and then there's project management tool. And so then it goes and there's quality management defects, right? And so we have defects within iterations, then we have defects that go in Jira, but then if a defect's found outside of that, it goes in Quality Center or ALM, but then if it's in production, it's an incident or problem in service. Now, okay. So we go through the journey of a feature, of a defect, and then a risk and a debt, which we've kind of already said. What's that look like? And then try to talk through what are your integration opportunities that you have, right? Because a problem, and depending on how they look at problem and incidents, right? Whether it's a problem, an incident becomes a problem, something that requires a software fix, right? So something happens in the field, something gets entered in ServiceNow, problem or incident.
Mm-hmm.
You need a defect in ALM, let's say, and you need something in Jira that has to be worked, or Azure DevOps, right? That has to be worked. You don't want three sources of the truth, right? Now, the service management person wants to go into ServiceNow.
Right.
The quality management person wants to go into ALM.
Mm-hmm.
And developers, for sure. I mean, developers really only want to be in their IDE, their source code, Git, whatever, source code management, their Slack tool, right? Their collaboration tool. That's all they want to do. And you don't want a million licenses for everybody to go in.
Well, that's just it. It's licensing consideration, but it's also, this is where I work.
This is where I work, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Bring the work to one of the credos we kind of have is you want to bring the work to the people rather than have the people hunt to find the work, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
We call it work management freedom, right?
Sense.
Allow people to work in the tools they want.
Yeah, I love that. Work management freedom, work management liberty. Yeah, I love that. So, you want the view of that incident, and that view of the defect, and that view of the bug, or however you've represented it in your your agile management or project management artifact, all be synced and all be integrated and all tell the same truth. And if you're measuring the time, it should, it's from the beginning to the end, right? Sometimes I've seen companies where as soon as the defect is entered, they may close the ticket in ServiceNow. Well, it's not done. No. So they'll run a report in ServiceNow. Oh yeah, it took 4 days. And the business looks at that and says, what are you smoking? 4 days? That thing isn't even closed yet, I don't think.
It's still in work, yeah.
Right? And the same thing in ALM, right? If you represent information to the business that doesn't correlate, doesn't pass, the smoke test or common sense, you've lost credibility.
And that goes back to your point earlier about the disconnect with IT and the whole cultural disconnect. It begun, the relationships are founded in truth, right? And the business in your scenario is saying, what you're telling me is not true. You're doing something to meet a metric that has nothing to do with my business outcome.
Exactly. So we will show, like, for example, we'll work with customers and they'll look at things like stories. Mm-hmm. And we'll show, okay, your stories, you can do stories in 10 days, 12 days. If they, I was on a call with a customer and they brought their business into it, and their business looked at this chart and, looked at the metrics and said, I never see anything
in 12 days.
Right. Now, luckily, we had also modeled the higher level artifact, which is the feature of the epic. And we showed that view because I sort of sensed this was going to happen. And it showed 40 or 50 days. Well, that resonated. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, that sounds more like it. It's 40 or 50 days. So then that begs the question, well, if I can do stories in 10 days, why can't I what am I doing where my features are 50 days? And I get it. The feature may have multiple stories, but still, isn't there, I talk to some customers that say, well, when we go into a planning meeting, we try to give every stakeholder a little bit of something so they walk away happy. Well, that sounds great, but that's like a builder starting more houses so the people who just put their contract in are happy, but at the end of the month, I haven't closed any houses.
Right.
I haven't delivered any value to anybody. Nobody's living in a house. Furthermore, I haven't made any money. The bank who I owe money to is saying, Carmen, where's our money? Right. So, we have this saying that is, stop starting and start finishing. And so, you see a lot of these, again, it gets back to culture, right? But if you can make this visible and you can have these discussions and you could talk about the fact that, A, we need to show data relating to the truth. So what is the true time to close an incident? What is the true time to close a defect? What is the true time to deliver something of value to the customer, which is probably not a task or a subtask, right? It's probably a feature or an epic or something.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get credibility. Then you can start having the right conversations. And then you can make your case why a certain way of prioritizing work, will get you a better result. But if you don't have outcome-based data, you're coming to the table, right, without a very strong hand to try to have that discussion.
That's a great point. Wow.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I was wondering about is, we all talk about digital transformation, and it's getting a little tiresome as a buzzword is concerned. But you literally wrote the book it's called Standing on Shoulders, A Leader's Guide to Digital Transformation. I was wondering, do you address, I haven't read it personally, but do you address in that book, you talk about, moving these things to the cloud. You talk about, are they going to be refactored? Are they going to be lifted and shifted? Are they going to be, discarded? And moving, certain, customer-facing applications to a cloud environment opens up a lot of doors and a lot of conversations about, should we innovate on this now, or should we just move it? We're no longer having to maintain the hardware or the internal architecture or the disaster recovery that we were before. Do you find that more IT departments have more resources and are more focused on innovation because they are able to leave some of that behind?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'll give a little pitch. Yes, I don't know how to get it in the camera here, but yes.
I do have it on my Kindle, and I have been reading it.
I appreciate that. So, there are, I think the concepts of why, the rationale behind why people started to go to the cloud has changed, right? Initially, it was, I have these class 4, 5, or data. I have all these large data centers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to save a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's financial,
right?
It's a financial decision. Like, there's economies of scale with the cloud, right?
Economies of scale, but I think what people have found is it's really not come out to be so much a cost issue as what you've said. What are the other opportunities I have? How can I innovate more? What opportunities does it give me? The elasticity, the other concepts that I have going to the cloud. The availability, reliability, things like that, performance, security. Yeah.
But that's an interesting one, if we could touch on that for a little bit, because at first it seemed like, several years ago, people were resident to go to the cloud because of security. We saw that a lot when I was managing financial accounts, with folks saying, no, I need to keep my data. I have reasons that it needs to be under my umbrella. And those reasons have kind of turned their a 180, really, because the cloud really can be more secure than you're able to invest in your systems, that the resources that you're able to bring to bear about that security, the expertise you have in house, your ability to have threat detection, and your ability to respond to it takes a lot of investment and a lot of expertise. And it's just, there's, companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are investing millions, if not billions of dollars in security. Yeah. And you couldn't possibly do that on your own.
So you bring up, so like about 3 different.
Sorry about that. Yeah. I tend to do that a little bit.
That's a great question. So I'll start going down a few roads, and you can really. The first one, I think, is just this general concept of do it yourself.
Uh-huh.
Right? So, people could say, well, we have products, you have a product. They could say, well, I could build this product myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have something, or we have this neat thing we do for work intake that's very. So I don't even argue that anymore. I'll just say, okay, let's just
give it up
for the sake of argument that you have the solution. right? Now let's think about this. Let's think about the next 3 months, 6 months, year, 2 years. Okay, what's going to change? Well, the world's going to change. We've seen that in this last year, which is going to change, the marketplace and everything else. The way you do work is going to change, right? You may want another tool. You may have another methodology, right? Or another twist, or you're going to do improvements. The whole landscape is going to change in the case of security, right?
Absolutely.
You have to keep up with it. There's insights and capabilities that are going to be built by the people who are investing in these products. What's it going to cost you? Let's just pick one of those scenarios. What's it going to cost you now to take your product that you've invested yourself and keep up versus what you can buy from what you can get from this product you bought, who's constantly they have to keep up, they have to stay competitive, they have to do that to stay in business. Are you going to be able to keep up with that? And I think people very quickly understand that, while yes, maybe initially on a small scope, and then, can you really scale this the way, have you really scaled this across your organization?
What if you don't scale it because you don't have those internal resources and you don't invest in it? What's the opportunity cost that you're missing out on?
Absolutely. Yeah. So yes, in fact, when I was at Nationwide before, just in this one little area, right? When I was talking to Tasktop, the product that we currently have, Viz, didn't exist. We had Integration Hub, which was our flagship.
Right.
And there was a way to utilize Integration Hub and the EDS capability on top of that, to where you could, with a little bit of your own heavy lifting, create Tableau reports and get your own version of flow metrics. But it was clear to me that there was a lot of work here to do this and to keep up with it and to scale it and to improve it. And so I needed it to prove the concept, but it is not a road I wanted to keep on going, right? I wanted to go with the people who are going to be able to take this, not just breadth of scale, but also, depth, if you will, of features and capabilities. And so cloud is no different. Your tool's no different. Our tools are no different, right? We have to continue to innovate and keep up and make them adaptable, scalable, sustainable. The maintainability of these things, the total cost of ownership, if you try to take these on yourself, is going to be overwhelming. And now you're taking people who could be adding business value, doing something that's differentiating to your market for something that you could have bought. Right. And eventually those curves are going to cross.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's those things you mentioned early in the conversation that start to bog down the features that people are wanting, right? But they're now being bogged down by the risk and the debt, right? Because when you build it yourself, you're having to accommodate all that. And like you said, early on, that doesn't become apparent. But when you try to do it at scale, those things, they catch up to you, and it starts to bog down, and you get back into that whole conundrum of why does IT always say no? And what are they doing over here? They're not giving me my features.
Right. Absolutely. So that's a great point. Now, having said that, you can't just make the assumption though, well, I'm in AWS, I don't have to worry about performance or risk. No.
Right. Still
have to worry, right? If I'm black holing traffic for some reason, and I spin up another instance that's going to black hole traffic, I'm not going to improve my availability that way, right? I have to still think about, we used to call the non-functional requirements, and risk, right? Mm-hmm. It's different, right? I'm worried now more about the risk of my source code, my open source libraries. Mm-hmm. I have to still be very diligent because, I'm still exposed. Right. And so, yes, you have to understand what you're getting, but you also have to then that allows you to focus on the things that you need to focus on.
Right.
Make sure you're still providing the customer experience that you want. That's going to not only get you market share, but allow you to keep market share and grow it.
That's a great point. Right. A lot of the other probably cloud momentum that's out there is, when my competition is going into the cloud and saving money, enjoying economies there, and is able to innovate faster, I have to do it too.
Right. Right. And that brings up another point that you just reminded me of from your initial point is how you start, right? So you start small. You have to prove it to yourself, right? I mean, your competition is a driver, but also when people see that they can do this themselves, right? So Peggy's team has done this, and Leon's team has done this, and Katie and Jack, Ravi, it's real to them, right? It's not just, oh yeah, we're not a unicorn, we're not an Amazon, we're not a Netflix. Well, no, these are people in your own company now that have gone to the cloud, that have implemented, these concepts of flow, of visibility, these DevOps practices. They can now release on demand, release when ready. Now the business says, well, wait a second, if hey Mike, you always told me you can only release on the third Sunday after a full moon. I mean,
that's right.
now Jenny's team is getting releases like Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. What's going on, right? It starts to shift.
Right.
All of a sudden, the culture is to your benefit because hey, I want that too, right? There's the FOMO's real, right? I'm missing out on something. FOMO. I'm missing out on something here. So once you start small and once you start to get those first two, I think there's something that says if you prove something 3 times, then you have credibility or something. Once you start building up believability, credibility, trust, things start to turn. And those stories of success, those examples, look at what we're doing here with this, with your product, with our product, with how we're managing our value stream, with how we're getting flow and business results. Well, now other people want that. And so then you start to get traction. That's what starts to drive the culture. Now you can start to scale it. The mistake I think people make initially is they want to try to figure out how they're going to do something across their entire organization before they've even done it once and learned from that.
Yeah,
right. Do something, you're going to learn so much, and then that's going to help
build on it
in the journey.
Right. Yeah, it's like just an analysis paralysis, committee-based approach to getting things done. Like we're just going to think about it until we've covered every base. Rather, just getting started with the digital transformation. It could be a QA workload or a dev workload. You just want to get it into the cloud. You just want to basically be able to move your test environments. Or it could be refactoring an application that has a limited reach into a certain department, and then basically learning from that, exploring other applications that could be refactored.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that a lot in the book, is this idea of start small, learn, experiment, have some guardrails, right? You have to manage your risk of doing this. And then it's going to be part of a journey, plan, do, check, act, continuous improvement journey. You create these patterns and you start to apply them and scale them across your organization. And you do, what Deming called systems thinking, right? Which is kind of analogous to Gene Kim's first way of optimize the whole. So what have I learned? So you need a group of people who can, are kind of sitting on top of this, outside the systems, to some degree, seeing how things are working, and then being able to help scale this across your organization.
So we started this podcast in March, actually. We were out of necessity, really, Mike, right? When we wanted to reach our customers. We couldn't travel anymore. Now, you wrote that book came out in January, Carmen. So it was January 2019, right?
Right.
So how do you feel like COVID-19 has really accelerated, I won't put words in your mouth, but we feel like the people who had thought of these things before this all happened, and put the systems in place, put these processes in place to move into digital transformation, we're better suited to deal with COVID-19 and the downturn and the working from home than other companies. Can you talk about that a little bit? You've probably had the opportunity to give it quite a bit of thought,
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we've kind of been in a unique situation, for better or worse, I guess, because we work with our customers as they've gone through this, right? So a couple of things I think that comes to mind is, the first thing is so Mick talks a lot about Carletta Perez and this concept of the turning point. She's a brilliant economist who wrote a book talking about the turning point, and that the age of software, and I'm not going to go into detail, but look her up, and if you read Mick's book, it's in there, or seen his presentation, but you're right. There's kind of this turning point, like at the beginning of the last century, there were hundreds of car companies in Detroit.
Right.
Only a few of them. Once it became understood how to do, the things that Henry Ford understood how to do this in mass production, other companies copied that. It became a golden age, but not everybody made it to the turning point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we want a world where you only have a handful of companies that are dominating, and in some ways, some people could argue we've seen that happen, right? So it has exacerbated this, that the companies that got it and were already through the turning point, the gap has widened. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also motivated companies to realize they have to accelerate their journey,
right,
to be able to compete. Now, what does that mean? I mean, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Well, I think it means things like, hey, your work, and I've said this now multiple times, but your work has to be visible in tools.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're all together. You could be informal. You
right.
Could talk,
yeah. You over the cubicle, right?
Where's this
card? How's this going? Yeah. Where's my whiteboard with the sticky notes?
Oh, yeah. It's on that board. Or ask Joe. Ask Kim. She knows where things are. Well,
right. Or those people look busy. I'm pretty sure they're doing something.
Right. You go to Gemba. Right. You go to Gemba. I always talk about this. People are busy, right? Flow is not based on people waiting. It's based on work waiting.
Right.
Right. Like in a warehouse, you can go up to the 4th floor and you can see the inventory piling up. You can't see that in software. And so now that we're remote, it's become even more important that the information in your tools be accurate, that people can go and get what they need, right? You can't have all these meetings. You don't want all these, Slack can be great, but no one wants to be interrupted a million times a day on where's my thing and what's going on.
Right.
Be able to go to these tools that we've talked about, right? Where am I working? Where can I go? You want to pull data and you want to see, it has to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's put more value in things we've always talked about, which is make your work visible. This is also by my peer, Dominica de Grandis. I can give her a little pitch there if you haven't read her book. It's a great book. But making work visible and so people can go and get that information. And then some of the integration things we talked about, because you really there's only one source of the truth. If an incident happened and it's being fixed, I don't care what it says in tool A, B, and C. What's the truth?
Absolutely.
What is the truth? So I think it's just doubled down on the idea that you have to have an integrated pipeline. You have to be for the relationship of everything that's going on for your initiative. You have to be able to show where things are flowing and, more importantly, where they aren't. Because now, if you have a limited amount of money for investment, you better make it count. Right? So we will look at a value stream and we'll see things like many months of work that's being prepared based on what the team can do, maybe 5-6 months of work that's in a backlog. Okay. And then we'll see at the right-hand side of their value stream, a large bottleneck in system testing, release testing, regression validation, whatever they call it. Right? So on the one hand, you're preparing all this work that you can't do for months and months.
Right. It's just like, in the backlog,
sometimes I use a pizza box analogy. It's like I have an OKR to make pizza boxes. It's like that one commercial.
Yeah, there's a huge pile.
So no, it's kind of like the goal story. If you read the goal about the robot.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm filling up a room with pizza boxes. I'm buying another room. I'm buying more cardboard. I'm hiring more pizza box makers. Well, but my problem is I don't have enough oven capacity, or I don't have enough delivery or something is wrong over here. What am I doing? Right. And in the middle is where you have development. And sometimes the last thing you need is more developers. Developers are not your bottleneck, right? You probably need to move some investment from one part of your value stream to another part. And so now, if you're one of these companies that's struggling to make it through the turning point, you still have to invest, because if you don't, you have no chance.
Yeah, well, it's almost a catch-22, because now, with the downturn, maybe they lost some customers or some revenue streams, and not only do they have to invest now, it's more important than ever, but they can't.
Right.
So that's what you were saying earlier about how do they get out of that hole, dig themselves out.
Right. And I didn't talk about this, but this idea of IT as a cost model rather than a profit or an investment, right? The companies that made through the turning point, they use IT as a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If I'm going to buy stock between two companies, and one company is investing more in IT and one company is investing less in IT, am I going to buy the stock of one's investing less? I don't think so. Now, do you have to be smart about your costs? Sure. You always have to be smart. You always have to apply lean concepts. But if the business sees you as and I forget who said this at a DevOps conference, so I won't try to quote them because I'll get the wrong person. But I think, essentially they said, if the business sees you as a cost, they're going to want to reduce your costs. If they see you as a profit center, they're going to want to improve their investment. But as you said, at this point, I better make my investments count.
Make them count. Yep.
And unless I know where my bottlenecks are, I'm going to invest.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Right. I mean, I have an intuition, but in some ways I'm guessing, and this is not the time to be guessing.
It's not. So investing in that visibility from front to back, where are things going? Where is it going through in the various systems that you have in order to get that value stream visibility is probably more important than ever for those companies.
Visualize and get to that source of truth faster.
The source of truth,
so that that singularity of truth that you mentioned, and so that there is the ability to take action faster and do things with it. I think that you talk about making investments. That's what decision makers always look at, is what information do I have to make the decision now? And by pulling this information together, I think it makes a great point that's going to help you maximize these investments that you have to make, even with more limited budgets, to get better results and better value out of them. That's awesome.
Yeah, and again, you're right. It all starts with that visualization, because you can't manage if you can't see it, you can't manage it.
Right.
And if you can't manage it, you can't improve it. So it all starts with having that visualization.
Awesome. Well, great conversation, and huge value, I think, for customers that are in that position to be able to hear it from you, Carmen. One last question before we go: How are your Steelers doing this year? What do you think?
Well, I mean, they won their first two games, although in the last game they were dealing with a backup quarterback. So they're usually slow. I mean, historically, they're slow starters. Obviously, Ben's back. My son actually writes for CBS Sports, Carmen DeArdo. So he gives me the firsthand lowdown. So, I think so far, so good. The Ravens, obviously, they have to try to find some way to keep up with the Ravens, who are sort of picking up where they left off during the regular season. So I'm just glad, and I went to Pitt, so they're also playing. So I'm just glad that, sports is moving forward. And
it's a big part of the normalcy in America, is being able to sit down on a Sunday or on a Monday night and watch a football game, or turn on the ball game, after work or something like that. So I'm really happy it's back in whatever capacity it is.
Yeah, I give them a lot of credit for working out, mechanisms to push this forward, and I'm happy to see it. And like you said, it's it's certainly great to see. So, you know, I was on some kind of message board last week, and people were complaining, you know, because fans always complain. It doesn't matter.
Of course, that's what you do.
Somebody said, well, it feels like life's back in normal. We're here complaining about blown challenges and bad calls and stupid play calls. So yeah, life feels normal, at least for these 3 hours when we're doing it. Good thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
You need a little release, that's for sure, with all the situation going on. Well, it was great talking to you, Carmen. Thanks for joining us today. And it was a great conversation and really insightful.
No, I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of Are You Done Yet? The podcast to help you with your work and management challenges. On behalf of Mike Taylor and Carmen DeArdo, take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.